These days before Bashir has to bench Heidish Shvat.
He's going to start with the benching and the
Yeah.
Telling you. Benching or Heidish Shvat.
But I don't think
That's your Gemara. I'm telling you, I put it up there
Oh, it's good. Thank you.
because you left it yesterday on your seat. You had to leave early. I understand. Okay, you can get it all right?
Thank you.
Okay. I just figured that's where you, so to speak, where you were putting it,
Thanks very much.
right? And I figured this way.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
false Mashiach, he's built a sukkah to make the same. So,
Reuven, I asked Michael, when you or he give the shear, does it run shorter than when I give it or longer? Whatever. More or less the same time.
5 minutes longer, maybe even 10.
Well, at least he doesn't have any interruptions when he's doing it.
Oh.
So let's see, emendation.
No, that's not true. I encourage.
Does he interrupt when you give the shear? He does? Oh, that's not pasnish. Come on.
Why not?
We discuss it in advance.
Yeah, I know that.
No, do you want me to give you help at this point or this point? Or would you rather leave you alone? We discuss it. I'm not just being mean.
He prepares interruptions in advance.
That's correct.
I'm sure.
See, Chaim is lazy.
All right.
Chaim, did you buy a basketball? So you can drop it from the roof of the building tonight?
Okay, Javi's not there yet. All right.
I can get some new material. I said, yes,
Then I go muck over.
Some of the milk was left over from the sisterhood event,
Yeah.
Marty, so I don't check it. But I did have somebody come, Marty, somebody came up to me that's part of the Nusach Sfard meeting, and they asked us to put our milk on one side, and they would put their milk on the other side.
Okay.
Same thing if we put our cookies in the refrigerator. Yeah, whatever, I think it was, he saw the sisterhood. Whoever was in charge of the Nusach Sfard, now that they have the refrigerator up here, they're going to have their own kiddushin. Well, okay, so the point was, he asked if we would make sure that their stuff or our stuff didn't get mixed in with their stuff. Believe me, that's why.
We typically have matches herring, right?
I don't know. He's got enough herring there to fill the Mediterranean. Okay, I'm going to start with the learning sponsors. Okay, and then we'll pick up a couple of things. Okay, a year of learning by Sue and Ani Garelek in memory of Malka Proman and Philip Mann. And Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Yosef Meir ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Henya Rivka Pro Rosna bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch. In memory of family murdered in the Holocaust, Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Sharon and Fred Liska, their family and many friends. In memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Edelbas Yaakov. Leslie and Gail Kaplan. In memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Sidell, Irving and Pearl Kaplan. Friends of Avi Gidler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, and Martha Gidler, Charna bat Yeshaya. Children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Toby Peres, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov in her memory. Friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim. Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine, in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata bat Asher. Friends of Nina Moinester, Nechama Asna Bad Yitzchak Aharon, many friends of Stephen Vigdor, Lezecher Nishmat Simcha Melech Ben Meir Leib Halev. We have a month of learning given by Haran and Mal Haller in memory of her mother, Malka Rachel Bat Yehuda Leib. We have by B. Pizer in memory of her husband, Harav Yisrael Chaim Ben David. By Tova and Leo Zimmer in memory of her mother, Henya Bat Rav Beryl, and her father, Aaron Ben Yosef Mordechai. And by Perry and Jill Meltzer in memory of his mother, Malka Bas Baruch, and his sister, Goldaleah Bas David Halevi. We have a week of learning by Isaac and Etta Novick in memory of his mother, Miriam Gittel Bas Chanoch, by Judith and Michael Poretsky in memory of her father, Yaakov Yitzchak Ben Hirsch Feivel, by Marvin Becker, starting tomorrow, in memory of his father, Yaakov Ben Meir, by Judy Iger, starting tomorrow, in memory of her mother, Bela Bas Anshel Yitzchak. Also have a day of learning tomorrow by Paul and Harriet Saperstein, in memory of his father, Avi Ezer Ben Tzvi. Okay. Shemas have an aliyah, crank Rafia, Velti Yeshua Shemat Leah, and the Chol B'nai Israel, a good gebench job. Okay. All right. Okay, a reminder once more that 2 weeks from today, we will be starting Moed Katan. Okay, so that you need to be sure you have that Gemara. Okay, and that we will be learning for a month. And then, as I said, a month after that, we'll be starting Chagiga. Okay, and that's going to, well, no, it's a little more than, well, it's, actually, it's just short of a month after that is Yevamos. Okay, so that will be, yes, it is. That's going to take us, well, I don't know if it'll take us that long, but it'll certainly, it will go into the summer.
That takes you right into the summer.
Right.
Yeah, all the way into the middle of the summer. Okay,
And we don't even do it.
that depends.
No, I mean, he doesn't do Yibam.
No,
He
you
does
do
Chalitza.
Right.
Although the Kanis Rabbeinu Gershon we learned yesterday is an exception.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right.
Harvey, you on? Not yet. Okay. Okay, so we were dealing at the end of Yud Chet Amud Beis with the question of what kind of writing material was acceptable or not acceptable, right? For the Gemara to say, okay, since it said it had to be in B'dio with ink, and we implied that that had to be black ink, right? And then the Gemara, the last line, right, of Yud Chet, right, said Haitak Tuva Besam, etc. Sam, we said, was Sama, a lemon yellow dye.
It's called orpiment.
Right. Okay. Amar Rabba Bar Barchana. Sakarta, no.
It's not Samamav.
Right. Sakarta was a Shma was a red dye. Okay. The Shma Kumus Kuma. And kan, all right. So that was a kind of raisin or sap. Okay. And then as we get to the top of Yud Tet, Amud Aleph, which is today's daf, okay, we get another example. Kantum, okay, right. Charta de ushchape, okay. We said that that is a shoemaker's blacking, a kind of shoe polish. So while that would, in theory, satisfy the color requirement, it wasn't necessarily still, right, the issue. Right? I don't know if shoe polish. I think it does shoe polish.
The geo can use a blade and lift
Right,
it,
that
and
you
it's
have
not
to.
gonna
Right,
crack,
right.
Shoe polish would leave a
A
stain.
stain, exactly. Okay, we go on now. We're on the top line of Yud Tet Amud Aleph Diptera. Okay, the Diptera is a kind of hide. The maliach v'kamiach lo afitz. Okay, in other words, the hide was processed using salt and flour, which is inappropriate. It needs to be processed using, right,
They use
gall
three.
nuts.
I don't think it's
The normal-
inappropriate, it's insufficient. As you said,
You need all three.
Not the source that I saw.
The
Okay.
normative way was to use all three, and this was like under processed.
Okay, well, that's one explanation. All I'm just saying is the source I saw said that it was not properly processed.
Okay, that
That's
was
the point.
underdone.
Okay, and because normally it's salt and flour. Okay, all right, not done with salt and flour, the gall nuts needed. Niyar machka. Okay, niyar is paper made out of reeds. Okay, which again would be inappropriate. Okay, so therefore we needed the gall nuts there to adequately prepare the hide. Right. Now, the next piece, ad shetehe ktuva ashurit, until it's written in ashurit script, right? Dichtiv, why? Kichtavam kichtizmanam, as it says, according to its writing and according to its time. Can't change the time, can't change the style of writing. Al hasefer ubidio v'chule. Minalan, asks the Gemara. How do we know this? Morning, her. All right. Couple lines down on Yud Tet Amud Aleph. Adya Kativa Kativa. Okay. We have writing in one place, and we learn it associated with writing in another place. Kativ Hacha, it's written here in one case. The Tichtav Esther Hamalka. And Esther wrote or had written the text, right? Uktiv Hatam, and it's written elsewhere. Vayomer lehem Baruch mipiv yikara elai et kol hadvarim ha'ele va'ani kotev al hasefer b'dio. So Baruch was the scribe for Yirmiyahu, who wrote clearly on parchment, okay, in black ink, Hebrew style print. That was the point. So they did the aktiva associate, right? Association of one with the other. Since there in that example, it specifically spells out that it has to be written in black ink on parchment. That's the case with the Megillah. Yes, Ted. Can a woman write a Torah?
No,
You can, but it's possible.
yes.
Show me where it says that.
Okay.
She doesn't have a group nothing.
Doesn't have a good.
Naki? I personally, I would have to say, I would need to look into this topic in more detail. I wouldn't render it may be as
First
suggested.
of all, there is a pasuk that says, write a sefer. She is patur for mitzvahs aseh shehazman ram. And she doesn't have, a sofer has to go to the mikveh each time he writes a shame. She doesn't have a group nothing.
Okay, all I'm saying is I would have to look into more sources just to clarify. Okay,
No.
all right. Okay. Matnit Narnu Mishnah. Ben Ir Shahalach Lekrach. Okay, somebody from a town that goes to a walled city. Ben Krach Shalach Le'ir, or somebody from a walled city that goes to a town. Im Atid Lachzor Limkomo, Kore Kimekomo. If he's going to be returning to his normal habitation, I'll put that phrase, okay? He reads according to his normal habitation. Okay? Ve'im lav, and if not, Kore imahem. He reads with them. So the Gemara now in the Mishnah says, Umehechan korei adam et Megillah v'yotzeba. So now we have a separate item in the Mishnah. At what point is one required to read the Megillah? And here we're going to see a multiple machloket. Okay, so here's we go. Okay, right, the following. Okay, we say ba yedei chovato. Okay, first of all, Rabbi Meir Omer Kula. According to Rabbi Meir, must read the entire Megillah. All right. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Me'ish Yehudi. That's Esther chapter 2, verse 5. Okay. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Me'achar Hadvarim Ha'eleh. That means starting the reading at Esther chapter 3, verse 1. Okay. So there again.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So in other words, so we see three different views, okay, as to that issue. Gemara is going to have to go into some detail because we can assume they want to discuss, first of all, where does each one get the basis for their argument? Okay. Amar Rava, says Rava. Going back to the first part of the Mishnah. Lo shanu ela she'atid lachzor b'leilei yudalit. Okay, no, says Rava, they only taught this with the fact that the person had to go back to their native habitation by the 14th, the night of the 14th.
After the Megillah reading where he was, he goes home. In other words, he goes home late at that night.
Where do you get that?
You'll see, because the question is going to be like, if you read it once, you'll see.
I looked at the Gemara. Let's see. Aval ein atid lachzor b'leilei aba'asar, but if his intent is not to return by the night of the 14th, okay, korei imahem, he reads with them. Okay? Now, Amar Rava, again Rava says, Mana aminala, on what basis do I put forward this concept? Dichtiv, why? Because it says, Al kain haYehudim haprazim, hayoshvim ba'arei haprazon. Those Jews who are scattered, who live in the scattered, I'll use that word, okay, cities. All right, and when it says scattered ba'arei haprazot, we're referring to the opposite will be ir mukaf, okay, a walled city. So this is arei pruzot, those towns, I'm going to say, that are not walled. Okay, so the Gemara continues, Michdi ktiv haYehudim haprazim, since it's written, those Jews, so to speak, scattered, Lama li lemichtav hayoshvim ba'arei haprazot. Why then is it written, those who dwell in separate towns, unwalled towns? Hakamash malan, the paruz ben yomo nikra. Paruz comes then to teach us, right, that when it refers to those that are separated, right? Ben Yomo Nikra. Okay, he is an inhabitant, okay, of that kind of a town, and therefore that's the point.
Then he's considered, even if it's just for a day.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. Hold on. Okay, he's considered an inhabitant of that kind of a community. Okay, the question is going to be, how long? Paruz. We'll see. We'll see. Hold on. Ishkachan Paruz. So I find then an answer in regards to Paruz. Okay. So if he's an inhabitant of that kind of a location, okay, depending upon how long he's there, he is still considered to be Okay, paruz. Mukaf minalan. How do I know this about the flip side, the opposite side? Okay, svarahu. All right, this seems logical. Mida paruz ben yomo karui paruz. Since one who is considered, okay, even for the minimum amount of time of a day, okay, since his original habitation was from that unwalled city, he is considered an inhabitant of an unwalled location, okay? Mukaf ben yomo karui mukaf. That therefore one who's, even if he's in the walled city for a time of a day, if his original habitation is from a walled city.
Completely,
From an unwalled.
you're completely out. Even if you live in a walled city and you're visiting Tel Aviv for just part of the day.
It depends on where your original habitation is.
No, he's saying,
Okay?
he's saying it depends on where you are now. That's what he's saying. He's saying even if you're from a walled city, but you're in B'nai Brak for the day, you read it like the B'nai Brakers. On the other hand, if you're a B'nai Braker and you're in Yerushalayim,
You read it like
for
the
day,
Yerushalayim?
you read it like the Yerushalmi. That's what Ben Yomov means. You're
I
there for the
understand
day.
that. I understand that. I'm just saying, okay, the source I saw did not present it that
Because
way.
he's not always right.
Okay? No, I'm
Because
just.
he does
Okay, look at the Gemara. Savarahu, mi de paruz ben yomo. Okay, if he's separated there at least for one day, karui paruz. He's called a paruz. Okay, that refers to him as having come from an unwalled location.
Read the Paruz ben Yomo, Karui Paruz. If the person is Paruz only for a day, he's still called a Paruz.
Right.
But in other words, he's not a Paruz normally. He's a Paruz ben Yomo. He's only Paruz today. Tomorrow he'll not be called a Paruz.
Okay, we'll see. I'm gonna go back and look. Ben Kafar
I'll read
Shalach.
from the English.
No, you don't have, I understand what that we seem to have a different explanation between Art Scroll and Koren. That's all I'm saying. Okay? Right? Ben Kfar Shalach La'ir, Ben Kach Uven Kach Korei Imahen. Okay, so then it goes on. Okay, one who came from a village, all right, and he goes to the town, an unwalled town, Bein Kach Uvein Kach Korei Imahen. He reads with them.
Look
So-
at on the 14th. Look at the Rashis, two Rashis starting at Minole and then
Okay, I'll have to look at it afterwards. Okay, all right, all right. My Tama, what's the reasoning? Hai Keben Ha'ir by the Mikre. All right, in this case, shouldn't he have been considered and called like an inhabitant of the town? Right? Rabbanan hu da'akilu al hakfarim kadei sheyisapku mayim umazon la'achehem shebekarachim. And it was the rabbis who made a leniency that therefore had the people of the villages, okay, come in to the towns in order to provide them with food and drink from the town, from the villages. Okay, so now Gemara picks up. Hani mili ki ite beduchte. Okay, this refers to when he is coming from in his place. Aval ki ite ba'ir, but when he comes to this town, kivnei ir ba'ila mikre. Okay, then he's considered to be one of the townspeople. Okay, and therefore that's how he should be called.
that's how I should read.
All right. In other words, he should be considered parallel to those inhabitants and then read according to that practice. Okay. Ative Abaye. So Abaye challenges this. Ben krach shehalach le'ir. Okay, a person from a village, okay, who comes to the city. Ben kach uvein kach korei kimakomo. He says, in this case, he says, in either way, he reads according to his place, where his original inhabitation. Ben krach salkadata. You think a villager in that case?
No, crack.
I'm sorry, the
Walled city.
Ben Krach, right from the walled city. You think that's his case? All right. Ba'im ati. Yeah. Okay. So ba'im ati lachzor talia milta. But here we came to say that in the future he's going to be going back.
Sometime during the day of
Right?
Purim,
He's going to go back. I'm still not convinced that it has to do with the day of Purim itself, by the way. Okay? Elalav ben Kfar. No, wasn't this only in terms of the issue of somebody who came from a village and not came from a walled city? Valav terutze metaretz. Okay? Yeah, okay. And since he says you've begun to amend or correct the Braita, okay? Why don't you do it further? Okay, Tane Kore Imahem. Okay, why don't you read then that he reads along with them, which would then support the view of Rav. Okay, so the Gemara now picks up with a new statement. Mehachan Kore Adam et Megillah. Okay, so we come back now to the second piece in the Mishnah. Okay, at what point do you start reading the Megillah? Tanya, taught in the Braita. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, mi belayla hahu. Okay, from that evening when he brings out the book, right, which is Esther chapter 6. Okay, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, b'chulan mikra echad darshan. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, they all darshaned, they all expounded the same pasuk, namely, V'tikatev Esther Hamalka uMordechai HaYehudi et Kol Tokef. Okay, that Esther and the queen and Mordechai the Jew wrote it with their full power. Okay, so what does it mean? Man da Amar Kula, according to the one who said the entire, that was Rabbi Meir, right? Tokfo shel Achashverosh. It was based on the power of Achashverosh when he was his entire sovereignty. Uman da Amar mi Ish Yehudi, and the one who said it was from Ish Yehudi, right? That was, I think, Rabbi Yossi, right? No, I'm sorry, that was Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, Tokfo shel Mordechai, from the power of Mordechai. Uman da Amar me'achar hadvarim ha'eleh. And the third example, right, which was, we said that was Rabbi Yossi from Esther chapter 3, Tokfo shel Haman, from the power of Haman. Okay, Uma.
So what does that mean? What does that mean?
Okay, in other words, they all darshan that same verse. Okay, but they're saying, how do you know when to start the reading? Okay, who had the power? Whose power are we talking about? Are we talking about from the power of Achashverosh? Then you have to read the entire story because it starts off Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh, hamolech mehodu v'ad kush, etc. Okay, so it talked about the entire, right? Later on, it talked about, okay, the power of Esther, right? Mordechai. Later on, it talked about the power of.
He wound up winning the war.
Okay.
No, but at that point, you didn't have power.
No.
No.
They introduced when the character who winds up
Okay,
being
in chapter
the
3.
powerful one
Okay.
is
When they
introduced.
introduce somebody who.
Right. In other words,
Correct.
Mordechai Yoshev Bashar Hamelech,
Okay.
etc., etc.
So
So already
And Haman
that
becomes
introduced
the
him.
finest.
Okay, and then later on it talked Okay, that's right. Va'ele takfo shel Haman. Uman amar balaylia hahu. Okay, takfo shel nes. And the fourth example was when the power of the miracle occurred. Okay, when God acted so that the Jewish people were saved.
Because the letters couldn't be erased.
Right? Rav Huna Amar says here, Mehacha. From here, Umara al Kacha, Umahagia Alehem. Okay, and Rav Huna suggests a different pasuk as the basis for which to determine. Okay, and notice his pasuk has two parts. Ma ra'u al kacha, what was seen in this regard, umahigia alehem, and what happens, what was the end result. All right, so we're now going to see. Again, they're going to take each of those earlier arguments, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and they're going to say, how does their positions how are they understood in now this other pasuk that Rav Huna is suggesting as the pasuk by which they could darshan and get their same results. Okay, so here let's go. All right, so Rav Huna gave his pasuk, and now we're going to see Manda Amar Kula, that Rabbi Meir said it was the entire Megillah, right? Ma ra'a Achashverosh shenishtamesh b'kelim shel Beit Hamikdash. Okay. In other words, that he saw the Jews al kacha mishum dechashiv shivim shanin v'lo ipro. Why? Because he saw, in a sense, that he used the utensils of the Beit Hamikdash because he, quote, saw that the Jews had not been redeemed. And therefore he thought, right? Therefore he could go ahead and do it. Second example was Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, Umahigia alehem, the second part of that pasuk, were not redeemed. Okay, and all right. So the second part of the pasuk that Rav Huna suggests, Umahigia alehem, okay, what happened? The Katel Vashti, and the Vashti was killed. Okay. Second example was Rabbi Yehuda. Umanda Amar me Ish Yehudi, and the one who says it was from Ish Yehudi. Ma Ra'ah Mordechai Diknei Bahaman. Once he saw, okay, that Mordechai was the subject of jealousy by Haman. Okay. Al Kacha, and on what actually happened. Deshave anafshe avodah zarah. Okay, that Haman made himself a object of idol worship because he required people to bow down to him. Okay, okay, and the second part of the Rav Huna's pasuk, umahigia alehem. Okay, what happened? De'it rachish nesa, that a miracle occurred. Okay. Third example, Rabbi Yehuda. Uman da'amar me'achar hadvarim ha'ele, and the one who said to read it from that point. Ma ra'a Haman shenit kana b'chol haYehudim al kacha mishum de Mordechai lo yichra velo yishtachaveh. What he saw was that Haman
saw Mordechai refuse.
Well, since Mordechai, I was going to phrase it the opposite order, just since he saw that Mordechai would not bow to him or not acknowledge him, okay, and he saw the Jews saw that as a model, as an example, okay, like that. And what happened? Umahigia alehem v'talu oto ve'et banav al ha'etz, and that they were hung on the tree, he and his son. All right, and the fourth example, which was, we said, I think was Rabbi Yossi, right? Uman damar ubalalia hahu, and that, right? That was starting chapter 6. Ma ra'a Achashverosh lahavi et sefer hazichronot al kacha hizminate Esther Lahaman Behedya, and he saw that when, after having read the book of remembrances, and saw then that Esther invited Haman along with Achashverosh to the dinner, right? Uma higia alehem, and what happened to them? The idrachesh nesa, that again, that the miracle occurred. Okay. Now, Amar Rab Chelbo, says Rab Chelbo, Amar Rav Chama Bar Guria, says Rav Chama Bar Guria, Amar Rav, in the name of Rav. Halacha kedivrei haomer kula. And the law is like Rabbi Meir, who said one needs to read it from the entire Megillah from book to end. Beginning to end. Va'afilu leman da'amar. And even the one who said, Me'ish Yehudi, right, who argued that it could be read from, that was Rabbi Yehuda, from Eish Yehudi.
All of the other opinions,
Right?
even if it's read from a later point.
Okay. Filu leman damar Me'ish Yehudi, tzricha shetehei ktuva kula. It has to all be written. Okay. Full text. Okay. All right. Amar Chalba, Amar Rabbi Chelbo, Amar Rav Chama Bar Guria, Amar Rav again. Okay. Megillah Mikret Sefer. At times, this book of Esther is called a book. V'nikret Igeret. At other times, it's called a letter. Nikret Sefer. Okay, that when it's called a book, that tells us She'im Tefra B'chutei Pishtan Pisula. That if it is sewed, the pieces of parchment are sewn together using flax as opposed to gidin from an animal, it is invalid. So therefore we see again another example. Remember our initial question, how else is the Megillah similar to a Torah scroll? Here's another example that the Gemara is telling us it's similar to a Torah scroll, that it too must have its pieces of parchment sewn by Gidin. Okay? V'nikret igeret, but it's also called a letter. She'im hitil ba shlosha chutei gidin kshera. But if it was only utilizing three, so to speak, stitches, okay, instead of multiple stitches, it is a valid Megillah. So in that case, it is different from a Torah scroll. Okay, all right. All right, so let's go on. Amar Rav Nachman, says Rav Nachman, ubilvad shehiyu mishulashim. So long as these stitching are mishulashim,
Equal length.
they're each one of them is,
A third.
I was going to say a third. I don't know if I would phrase it a third of a three. It's a third, okay, of the size of the cloth. Okay.
The cloth?
No, because you have the gap at the top and the length.
Well, we'll get to that, but
Third of the total stitching. They have to be, you couldn't have two small stitches and a big one.
right,
They have to be equal.
right.
stitches.
You've got the size of your piece of cloth, and you've got an empty space at top, an empty space at the bottom, and you've got a third. Okay. Okay. All right. So what happens? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Hakorem Megillah Haktuva Bein Haktuvim Lo Yatsa. Okay. So let's assume for the moment that it's talking about the scroll of Megillah is written in conjunction with other scrolls on a long, a number of pieces of parchment. Okay? And it's not a separate scroll unto itself. Whatever it is. Okay?
It would be Mistama be the
Okay.
Megillah.
All right, it could have, right. You could have all of the Megillahs written on one series of pieces of parchment sewn together. Okay? Lo yatsa, one has not fulfilled the obligation. Okay? Amar Rava, says Rava, lo amran ela de lo mechasra umiyaitra porta. This was said only if it's a situation where it's either longer or shorter. Okay?
They're individual pieces of cloth.
Okay, so what happens now? Let's assume that I've got, I've got a series. Okay, but notice they're not all the same measurement. Okay, right?
Not vertically, it's horizontal.
Okay,
One is 5 inches long and one is 12 inches long.
okay, all it's telling me right now is one is not longer or shorter. Okay, aval mechasra umaitra porta lit lanba. But if one is longer or shorter, okay, then it's fine. Okay, now you may understand that as the length of the piece of parchment. Okay, you may understand it as the width of the piece of parchment.
Rashi says arucha.
Okay,
Length.
so that's Rashi's understanding. Okay, all right. Levi bar Shmuel havaka kare kame de Rabbi Yehuda. But okay, so now we see something the following. And in a situation, Levi bar Shmuel had read before Rav Yehuda a Megillah. Hold on. Haktuva bein haktuvim. He once read it for Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, a Megillah that was written with other texts on the entire length of pieces of parchment. Okay, Amar le hare amru, but he said to him, hare amru hakorei b'Megillah haktuva bein haktuvim lo yatsa. But didn't the sages say, reading it that way, one doesn't fulfill the obligation? Okay. Does the Gemara give us an answer? Hamar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hakorei b'Megillah haktuva bein hakatuvim lo yatsa. Okay. Umachu la amocha b'tzibur shanu. Okay. And here it says one who reads the Megillah, okay, among other, I'm going to say texts of the scroll, doesn't fulfill his obligation. Umachu la amocha, and he sort of hit it right on the head. In other words, he qualified his ruling. B'tzibur shanu. This is what we're talking about in terms of a public reading. Okay, right? Va'amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. He says, Shi'ur atfar, okay, halacha l'Moshe Sinai. The measurement of the stitch, okay, is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's a Masorah. Umachula amocha, and again, he hit it right on the head. In other words, qualifying his reading. V'lo amru ele kadei shelo yikra. And they said that so long as it doesn't tear.
So he wasn't reading it for the public, he was reading it on his own?
Well, that's an interesting question.
Well, maybe he was practicing. If he could practice,
Then you don't need a kosher.
Okay, so the question is, first of all, the text said he was reading it for somebody else. That's what why the whole issue is an incident.
In halacha about whether when it says in public, whether they're talking about the 11th, 12th, 13th, where there you're trying to be assuming nieces, so it has to be a distinct scroll. But according to they're showing them go nuts over this. Whether in public means on the 14th or on the 11th, 12th, 13th. Most Megillas are single volume Megillas.
Mm-hmm. if you go, for example, if you decide that you're going to go purchase a Megillah, okay, for your own or for a shul or something, and you go into a Judaica store,
It ain't gonna be sewn.
Okay.
To a Rus.
what?
It ain't gonna be sewn to a Rus.
Well, you're going to see that it is a separate, it's a series of parchments, but it's only the Megillah. It's nothing else written on those series of parchments.
There's something like that cost.
What, a Megillah?
Yeah.
A decent Megillah today is probably $2,000. A really extraordinarily beautiful Megillah could be 3,000 or 4,000. Shul's Megillah is 3,000. Also, the smaller it is, the more expensive it is, interestingly, because they're harder to write.
Right.
Small letters. Depends on
It depends. There are a few items. Okay. Okay. Ela Kadesha Lo Yikra. Va'amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Ilmalei nishtayer b'ma'ara. So we now get into a slightly different topic. Ilmalei nishtayer b'ma'ara she'amad ba Moshe ve'Eliyahu kimelo nekev machat sidkit lo hayu yicholim la'amod b'fnei ha'ora. Okay. All of a sudden we have a new statement here. Okay.
Because you talked about stitching. So
All right. So in other words, if we said the size of the stitch, so how big are you talking about might the size of the stitch be? Okay. Let's think of it in that context. Okay. And v'lo amru ela kadesh. I'm sorry. V'amar Rabbi and Rabbi Chia Abba says the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Were it not for the fact, I'll say, that we're dealing with the cave in which both Moshe and Eliyahu stood when they were visited Har Sinai. Okay, and what happened? And an opening in that cave, a narrow slit, a fine narrow opening, right, was about the width of a needle, eye of a needle. Okay, lo hayu lecholim la'amod b'fnei ha'ora. They would not have been able to withstand the light. Okay? Shnei Amar, as it says, Ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai. Because a person will not see me and live. Right? Okay? That's the whole story where the wind passed and the this and the that. And then you had kol demama daka and things like that. Okay? Va'amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba amar Rabbi Yochanan. Ma'i dichtiv. What does it mean when it's written? Va'alehem kechol hadvarim asher diber Hashem imachem bahar. Okay, what does that refer to with that part of the pasuk? Milamed sheharuhu hakadosh baruch hu leMoshe diktukei Torah v'diktukei sofrim. It implies that Hashem revealed to Moshe all of the okay, I'm going to say the details, okay, the specifics of aspects of the Torah and aspects of the scribes, right? Uma shehasofrim atidim lechadesh, okay? Umay nihu mikra Megillah, okay? And all that the sofrim here, in other words, could also be referring to the sages, right? And what, in other words, all of these details, like the size of the stitching and how it's written, and all of these details, okay, were revealed to Moshe, who passed it down, okay, as Masorah, okay, right? And therefore, what new could be that the sages later enacted, namely the reading of the Megillah. Okay? Matnitin, our new Mishnah. Okay? Hakol ksherin lekrot et Megillah. All are valid to read the Megillah. Chutz micheresh shoteh v'katan. With the exception of a cheresh, okay, a person who may be deaf, shoteh, a person who's mentally not competent, v'katan, and a minor. Rabbi Yehuda machshir b'katan. However, Rabbi Yehuda seems to say a minor is acceptable. Okay, we'll clarify that in just a moment. Mantana charesh. Okay, the avad nami lo. The avad. Who is it that taught? Okay, that if a deaf person after the fact had read, okay, in other words, had read it, and then after the fact, that even then it's not acceptable. Amar Rav Matna, Rabbi Yossi. That's the view, says Rav Matna, of Rabbi Yossi. The Tznan, who taught elsewhere in a Braita, HaKorei et Shma, v'lo hishmiya la'azno, yatsa. Bryce, okay? Right? That's what I thought I said.
It's a Mishnah and Bryce.
Mishnah and Bryce. Okay, who said, one who recites, who reads the Shema and doesn't do it audibly enough to hear it himself. Okay, right? V'lo hishmiya la'azno, he didn't do it audibly. Okay, yatsa. Rabbi Yossi Omer. However, Rabbi Yossi Omer says lo yatsa. He does not fulfill his obligation. So Gemara asks, "Umimai de Rabbi Yossi?" How do we know that this is the view, so to speak, of Rabbi Yossi? V'di avad nami lo, and that when it's after the fact, okay, it's also not viable. It's also not a valid, okay, reading. Dilma Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe that's the view of Rabbi Yehuda. V'lechatchila hudelo. But ab initio, okay, lechatchila, he doesn't say that. Ha diavad shapir dami. But here it's after the fact that he's made his statement. In other words, maybe it's Rabbi Yehuda who's saying initially a cheresh could read it, but really the question is it's only after the fact.
You're saying lechatchila lo. It's
Lo, lechatchila, that's what I meant. Lechatchila lo, but after the fact, yes. Okay, maybe that's Rabbi Yehuda's view. Okay, ha the avad shapir dami, but here after the fact, it's well done. Lo salka da'atach. Don't even consider that. The katani cheresh dumia the shoteh. Okay, the katan. But here it's taught that the person who is deaf is similar to the person not mentally cognitive, aware, and the minor. Ma shoteh v'katan diavad nami lo. The same way that the shoteh and the minor, after the fact, we say no. Af cheresh diavad nami lo. So here too, likewise, the one who is cheresh after the fact also would be no. V'dilma ha kedeita. Okay, but perhaps, okay, we're saying here that the ita v'hada keita, but perhaps these are two separate topics, two separate issues. Okay, midikatani seifa Rabbi Yehuda machshir b'katan. But since our Mishnah says that at the end, that Rabbi Yehuda says that with a minor, it's valid, Miklau, Deresha, Lav Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, therefore, we will generalize and say that at the outset, at the beginning, okay, it's not like what Rabbi Yehuda. Vidilma Kula Rabbi Yehuda. But perhaps I might argue, says the Gemara, that the entire statement belongs to Rabbi. Okay? Midami, is that possible? Reisha lepsula, v'seifa l'kshela, that in the beginning he would say something that it is not valid, and at the end it would be valid. V'dilma kula Rabbi Yehuda. Perhaps then we might say the whole statement is from Rabbi Yehuda. Utre gavne katan katane la. And two varieties of minor is what we're teaching here. v'chasuri michsura v'hachi katani, and something is missing, and this is how we need to teach it. Hakol ksherim likrot et hamegillah. All are viable to read the Megillah, chutz micheresh shotev v'katan, except when we're talking about a cheresh, a deaf person, shoteh, somebody who's not mentally competent, or a minor. Bamed varim b'katan. What are we talking about when we refer to a minor? Shelo higia lechinuch, that he hasn't reached the age of education. In other words, not really know how to 4, 5, 6 years old. Aval b'katan shehigia lechinuch.
Here is actually old.
Okay, but a child, a minor who has reached the age of education, okay, we might say above 6, 7, 8, maybe. Afilu lechatchila shari sherabi Yehuda machshir b'katan. But in that case, even initially, Rabbi Yehuda would say that's viable for that kind of a minor. V'mayo kimta. How then do we establish this? Rabbi Yehuda v'diavad. Okay, that therefore we would establish our statement like Rabbi Yehuda and referring to after the fact, right? Elaha, the Katani Rabbi Yehuda, Berei the Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. But here, where it's taught that Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, says, Cheresh hamidaber ve'eno shomea torem lechatchila. Mani, okay, that he says that a cheresh who makes an oral statement declaring that he's going to give a certain truma initially, mani, according to whom is that?
He can make.
Can he make that?
According to Rabbi Yossi, you have to hear yourself.
Right. In other
So
words,
if he makes
it a moral, if he makes the oral statement that he's designating that stuff by using a bracha, right? But he's still, it's still,
can't hear him.
but that's it, because it's still making an oral statement, right? Rabbi Yehuda, the avad en lechatchila lo. That would seem to say that if it's Rabbi Yehuda, after the fact, yes, initially not, right? Rabbi Yossi, the avad nami lo. And if we say it's according to Rabbi Yossi, after the fact, even then, absolutely not. Velamai Rabbi Yehuda va'afilu lechatchila. But rather, what about Rabbi Yehuda and even initially? Elaha, the Tanya. But here where it's taught, lo yivarech adam birkat hamazon b'libo v'im berech yatsa. But what about the fact that we have a braita that says that a person should not recite their birkat hamazon by heart, but if he did so, he fulfills the obligation.
By heart, here it means silently. If he says it in his heart.
Okay, again, we're getting different.
No, we're talking about a person who cannot hear, who says a bracha.
Right.
That was the initial statement. Now it says, if someone says,
He says it to himself.
Heart, but that means not audibly.
Right, he's saying it to
doesn't
himself.
mean by heart.
Okay.
You know, like I say Birkas Hamazon all the time by heart, but I say the words.
Okay. All right.
Read it from a sinner, there's like that.
Okay. All right. All right. We're getting a difference. I'm telling you. Okay. Ve'im. Okay. All I'm telling you is that I clearly see again a number of cases where Art Scroll translates it one way and Koran translates it another way. I'm just sharing that. Ve'im beirech yatsa. Okay, but here it says, if he did it, you want to say without a sitter, if you want to say it, he did it by himself. Okay, right, without audibly reciting. Okay, without audibly reciting it. Okay, yatsa. Okay, he's fulfilled the obligation. Mani, according to whom? Lo Rabbi Yehuda, velo Rabbi Yossi. It's neither Rabbi Yehuda nor Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda, afilu lechatchila. If it's Rabbi Yehuda, it should be even initially. Rabbi Yossi, afilu diavad nami lo. If it's Rabbi Yossi, even then it would not be.
So you gotta read the next line.
Okay, so what happens, says the Gemara? Le'olam Rabbi Yossi.
No, Rabbi Yehuda.
I'm sorry, Le'olam Rabbi Yehuda, va'afilu lechatchila. Okay, why? Why do we say it could be Rabbi Yehuda even initially? Velo kasha, and it doesn't have to be difficult. Hadidei, hadirabe. Okay, one is his view, one is his teacher's view. Right. Okay, I will go back and look at that other piece in the Gemara. Okay.
You guessed it. Okay, have a good job. You guessed it.
Okay.
You know who we're talking about. Yes, yes, okay.
I find a marked difference between how Koren translates stuff and how Art Scroll translates stuff.
When it's word choices, that's one thing, but Quran deviates from the Masorah significantly often.
I
You
don't
go
know.
through
It
the-
gives it in its notes. It gives a variety
I
of
understand,
pshatim.
but he uses as his base translation. But Rashi and Tosfos argue about a phrasing. But
Right.
he does some third thing.
No, he gives in the
Okay,
notes.
I understand.
He
the
will give
tensions
Rashi and
there. But
Tosafot
if you
and
learn
others.
Daf Yomi, it's just supposed to be just taka Rashi, unless to go off on some other interpretation. You have to be learning with Rishonim, and it's
I don't
it's
know.
not a Bekia. You just
You have a good Shabbos, Rabbi.
Harvey, I got a quick
Yeah.
question for you.
Yes,
Okay. Yeah, we have been finishing davening a little bit earlier.
okay.
If we were to adjust the time, okay, to non-Torah reading days to 8:20,
No problem.
Torah reading days 8:30, it's not a problem for you.
No,
I wanted to check with you first.
Rosh
bef-
Chodesh will be
Okay, Rosh
significantly
Chodesh, of
later.
course, is always going to be later, right?
yeah, I know that.
Okay, so
Not a
long as,
problem.
so before I mention it to the office to adjust the time, okay, I wanted to just make sure you're comfortable with it too.
Yep. I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good Shabbos.
Have a good night.
Okay.
Come up here. It's right after, it's from your position, it's